Hey everybody, welcome back to Just One Perspective. My name is Josh. Thank you so much for joining. I am filming two videos back to back. You get a bonus today. The reason being that these two topics are kind of associated with each other, so while the thoughts are swirling around in my head, I wanted to broach both of them at the same time because, like I said, they're loosely related. But I may have mentioned back in 2018 that my wife and I went on this big East Coast historical trip. That's what we called it for the U.S. We visited Washington, D.C., the National Mall, visited a lot of the memorials out there, learned a lot about the nation's founding, our founding fathers, and a lot about their philosophy and the way they grew up, and bought a lot of stuff, lots of stuff, because I'm fascinated with that era, and I think we can learn a lot from it. So we went from there all the way up to Gettysburg. Everything over there is just so close to each other. Because I didn't at first want to go to Gettysburg. She told my wife we were just going to go from D.C. up to Philadelphia to go see Independence Hall, where the Declaration was signed and the Constitution was drafted, right? But when we were planning this trip, my wife said, well, let's go to Gettysburg while we're up there because we're going to be in the area. And my thought was, well, we live in Colorado. Nothing is close, right? If you live on the East Coast, you might think, well, if we're going to Colorado, let's just visit the Alamo. We're in the same area, but the Alamo is going to be like 12-hour drive, right? Something like that, maybe even more. Or you could even say, hey, we're going to be in the Denver area. Let's go see Alamosa and the Colorado Gators, because we have alligators here in Colorado. Let's go see them. We're going to be in the area. That's 4 hours away, and you haven't even left the state. But over there on the East Coast, everything's just kind of crammed back in together because the states were drawn up when people were still going by horse and buggy, right? So to get from D.C. all the way up to Gettysburg, that wasn't just like a couple-hour drive like it was for us. So it was just fascinating to me. When we finally got to Philadelphia on that same day, I was just amazed because we went into the elevator of our hotel and a woman jumped in there with us, and she looked just tired and haggard. And I think I said something like, hey, long day, huh? And she was like, yeah, I've driven through 5 states today. And I sat there and I was like, which states could that be? Because when I think of leaving here to go visit any family that it's in this area in which we live, going through 5 states would take maybe 2 days sometimes. I mean, I think about, I've got a brother in Illinois, so that's Colorado, Nebraska, which is the state that never ends and goes on for forever, then Iowa, then Illinois. And that's the whole day. That's like 18 hours right there. 16 hours. It's like 18 or 20 to go to Michigan. So anyway, that's all beside the point. Just some fun facts for you about the nature of geography and the way the states are set up. But while we were in Philadelphia, I bought the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, who I think is one of my favorite founding fathers. He and I just seem to have a kinship. He seems to be, I don't know if he's a lot like me or I'm a lot like him, right? Maybe more I'm a lot like him because only he can influence me. I can't influence him. But when I read this, I just found his perspective on things just so aligned with the way I see things. And I learned so much just from reading this book, and it's not even that thick. It's not even that long. But it's just chock full of wisdom, and he led an interesting life. He even raised an army and took it out to a fort. If I remember correctly, I could have that wrong because it's been about 4 years since I've read this. But there's one part in here that really stuck out to me. Well, there's a couple, but there's one that has been kind of swirling around in my head lately, and I thought I'd read you a quick excerpt of this. He goes into talking about his virtues, the 13 things that he thinks will make you a better person. I'm kind of making that quick, just summing that up, but that's the base of it, right? Is that he thinks that these 13 things, if you strive towards them, will help you become a better person. Well, the last one is humility, and there's a very small rule set for each of these, and for humility, it just says, imitate Jesus and Socrates, which very straight and to the point. But here he is talking about one of the things he tried to do to adopt and acquire the virtue. So I'm going to read you this real quick. I cannot boast of much success in acquiring the reality of this virtue, but I had a good deal with regard to the appearance of it. He's showing it right here. He's actually demonstrating in this very first sentence what he's about to say. I love it, but here we go. I made it a rule to forbear all direct contradiction to the sentiments of others, and all positive assertion of my own. I even forbid myself the use of every word or expression in the language that imported a fixed opinion, such as certainly, undoubtedly, etc. And I adopted instead of them, I conceive, I apprehend, or I imagine a thing to be so or so, or it so appears to me at present moment. When another asserted something that I thought an error, I denied myself the pleasure of contradicting him abruptly, and of showing immediately some absurdity in his proposition. And in answering, I began by observing that in certain cases or circumstances his opinion would be right, but in the present case there appeared or seemed to me some difference, etc. I soon found the advantage of this change in my manner. The conversations I engaged in went on more pleasantly. The modest way in which I proposed my opinions procured them a readier reception and less contradiction. I had less mortification when I was found to be in the wrong. Important point. And I more easily prevailed with others to give up their mistakes and join with me when I happened to be in the right. So what he's saying, just to summarize, is when he knew somebody was wrong, he stopped himself. He didn't say out loud, that's wrong. He didn't say, I'm right. He probably even stopped thinking in those terms. And I've found for myself that that's beneficial. When somebody says something that I don't think is completely true, I no longer think in my head, or I try not to think in my head, that statement is wrong. Instead, what he did was maybe he asked questions. Do you think it works in this case? Or he said something like, it appears to me that it works in the case you're talking about, but I have seen it over here, where it's gone differently over here. And so what he's really doing is appealing to their ego to some sense, or at least not crossing their ego. Because when people have ideas, or as Jordan Peterson says, ideas have people. But people can get wrapped up into them. Their egos can get tied to them, especially if they think they know something. That's something to be proud of. I know about this topic. I know these things, and I can share that with you. And if you just come in, this was the topic of a previous video of mine, don't wield the truth like a hammer. When you come in and you just say you're wrong, especially when you're in front of other people, you're knocking them down a peg. But I have had more success doing the Benjamin Franklin method of just telling them, or asking them, hey, does it work in this case? Well, what about this case? And before you know it, they're walking their whole statement back. And some of it is still true. That's what I'm finding about this world that we live in and the opinions that inhabit it, is that everything that everybody believes is probably partly true. It's true to some extent. Obviously, there's going to be some things that are just completely false, right? But 95% of what people say is wrong, but there's still an element of truth to it, and that's the part you need to dig out. And if you can help them do it by giving them a chance to think through it themselves, you're both better off. They're better off because you've taught them how to do some critical thinking, and you're better off because now you've instead of damaging a relationship, you've preserved a relationship while helping them get to that conclusion. Now, if you're like me, this can be infuriating sometimes because you see where we are and you see where we need to go and you know how to get there, and instead of asking questions, you just say, why don't we just go there? And that drives some people nuts. And I've learned how to worm through that a little bit better. And you know what I've found is that sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes where I thought we should be going was not correct because other people had these different perspectives. They were much more valid and had a lot more experience than I had. And as I was asking them questions, I found that I actually needed to adjust the way I was thinking about it. And so if you're thinking that you're right, and somebody else is wrong, that's, like I've said before, wielding the truth like a hammer. And one other part that he said that I really want to dig into is I more easily prevailed, excuse me, sorry, let me back up. I had less mortification when I was found to be in the wrong. And you might say, well, of course, if you're sitting on a fence, it's easy to just backtrack a little bit, but that's not what he's doing here. He's gently guiding them somewhere that they need to go, or that he thinks they could go, and he's going on the journey with them. And so if he's wrong from the outset, when he gets to that point, when he realizes that, oh, I was wrong, then he at least started by saying, hey, I don't know everything. I don't have all the facts. I don't have all the information. I don't have the knowledge of the universe swimming in this head of mine. I could very well be wrong. This is the way I think it is. Oh, I found that that's not it. Hey, great job over there. Thank you for educating me. And I'm sorry that I took it this way. But if you start from the platform of, I'm not always right, I don't know everything, you come off as a lot more human, and you're not going to fall so quickly. But if you portray yourself as being all the way up here, I know everything, there's nothing that I don't know, you're going to fall very far when somebody points out that you're wrong. And the second part is what I was trying to read just a moment ago. I more easily prevailed with others to give up their mistakes and join with me when I happen to be in the right. This is what I've experienced as well. What he's saying is that he's more likely to make a friend from somebody by helping preserve that relationship and getting them to knowledge by going on the journey with them rather than hitting them with that hammer. So this kind of ties into the previous video, because if you're trying to do the right thing and you understand that you're fallible and you have to make an apology, then it's not gonna be nearly as hard if you started with a genuine heart, with a genuine thirst or hunger for the truth, and understanding that you're fallible. But if you started out by saying, I'm just right, I know that I'm right, and then you go and do something and it hurts a bunch of people and mess it up, that's going to be a hard apology to make. Man, that's going to be much more tough than if you say, hey, I want to try this. And if it doesn't work, I'm sorry, but I want to try this. And then it goes and hurts people, and you say, okay, look, yeah, that was the wrong thing to do. Let's adjust, right? This approach, the Benjamin Franklin method, is gonna make things so much better for you and the people around you. Trust me. I have been using it for the last 4 years, and it is very close to a Socratic method, as he states. So maybe it's a misnomer to call it the Benjamin Franklin method, but I love this guy and I love what he stood for, and just trying to make yourself a better person, I think, is one of the things he's well known for, besides his dry wit and humor, but that just made him all the better. So I'll leave it at that. Some things to think on. I would recommend you pick this up, give it a read. It's not too long, as you can see, and it's well worth it. So anyway, like I said, leave it at that. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. If you want to join in the conversation, send me an email, descriptions in the comments, descriptions below, and feel free to leave a comment, ask questions, let me know what you're thinking. Hey, how's your day going? Let me know. All right, and if this has been helpful and meaningful to you, and you think it would be helpful to anybody else, feel free to share it. That's the whole point. So anyway, thank you all for your time. Stay vigilant out there, and I'll see you next time.